We're so blessed to have her doing these amazing videos. Welcome to OC Grace First Service. We want to be an authentic expression of Kingdom of Heaven. We want to show grace everyone, everywhere, every time. If you're a visitor, welcome. We hope you got one of those gift bags. Nice little coffee mug. You can get your aroma in. Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming here. We've been doing a lot of good things. How many of you enjoyed this unplugged service? I thought that was kind of fresh. It's kind of nice, kind of new. 5 of us? Yeah, good. It was good. It felt good. It felt good. I think a lot of times praise and worship, we get it almost becomes like a gimmick. You know what I mean? Like, did you hear that service has drums? And then you come for the drums and the show and the lights and the smog machine. I think smog machine. We're in California. And so we get these machines and we get the lights and all this stuff, and it feels real gimmicky. But here at the service, I love it because we do praise a little different. The reason we do praise is different. We do praise and worship because they understand that we're singing our stories. Have you ever had that moment where you heard that one song and you're like, that was my song. It's my song this week. And maybe you never liked it before, but all of a sudden you found those words were your words because it's your story all throughout the week. And now you're giving it voice and you're hearing other people singing it, and all of a sudden you just come alive because that song is your song. That's praise, that's worship, that's why we do it. So beautiful. Today is our first in the series of Jonah. It's going to be 4 parts. And today we're going to talk about fabled whale stories, Jesus bumper stickers, and sinking paper boats. But before we do, let me pray with you. God, I thank you. I praise you for allowing us to be here. Thank you that we can take time and we can just spend it in community, creating this space where life happens. We ask, Lord, that you'll just help us to see a new picture of you today. In your name we pray. Amen. Jonah. How many of you read this story when you were young or saw it on the felt board? Or some of you on Veggie Tales through the cucumber? Good. I read this story many times. And I think the most important way to start any time you're looking at a biblical text is to ask some important questions. First of all, who is it that wrote it? And who's the audience? And so I want to start by giving you a little knowledge. The audience and the writer are important. And so this piece is written, many historians will say, sometime after the Babylonian exile. And so this is a time many will put during the Persian exile. Others will put it even further back. But what we have here is the Israelites still don't have their home. They still have not received the promise from God. They're still in captivity. And they still don't have their temple. And for them, the temple is very important. That's the place where God is, right? That was how the ancients viewed the temple. That's how many of us still view church, right? That's why the little children, if they're running in church, we're like, you walk quietly in the sanctuary. We have these ideas still. The problem is God is no more present here than he is outside or in your home. God is present here among us everywhere. Our God cannot be contained in a building, amen? But that's how they viewed him. And so this understanding, the writer actually puts Jonah, though, during the Assyrian Empire, the very height of it, which is about 600 BC. Now, I give all of you that because I think it's important to know who's writing the story. Now, another thing that you'll notice about Jonah is there's 12 books. We call them minor prophets, and Jonah is the 5th one. And all of the minor prophets, what they're doing is they're basically doing this. They're giving messages of hope and challenge. How many of you have ever heard the word prophecy? Okay, be honest with me now. When you hear the word prophecy, do you immediately think of like levitation and people holding books for a long time and weird eschatological events? Or am I just the only one? Figures. Well, that ruins my whole point. Prophecy, it's not any of those weird things that we often get associated with prophecy. Prophecy is this: messages of challenge and hope. That's prophecy. That's biblical prophecy. And all these writers and these minor prophets, they were writing and giving their people messages of challenge and hope. And so Jonah, though, is a little bit different. Jonah is like the anti-prophet. It's like someone wrote a book and said, how not to be a prophet. What not to do. And so Jonah does everything that you probably shouldn't do as a prophet. Right? So this is the story of Jonah. And the story of Jonah, it starts with this word, wahi. And this word is a Hebrew word, and it's important that we understand it. It's a word that means this. It happened on a day like this. Have you ever been around a campfire and it starts to get dark and someone will come up into the background by the fire all creepy? It happened on a day like this. There was a big bear, a giant bear, a man-eating bear. And they like tell this story. I love telling those stories. Why? This is a word that means it was similar to what we're seeing now, but they'll experience it bigger and bigger and bigger, told around campfires. And so it's actually interesting because the book of Job is written in the same way. He was not just rich, he was the richest man in the world. Everything big, better, extravagant. It's not just a bear, it's a man-eating bear, grizzly bear. But I live in Southern California. It doesn't matter. It's a polar bear. What? It's huge. It's a polar bear and a grizzly bear married. And you're like, what? And it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so with the story of Jonah, it's interesting because everything's big. You have a big fish. And you have this story about this one person goes to one city, huge city. One day, he changes the whole empire of Assyria. Big, big, big. However, there are not a lot of details about specific time periods, specific names. You don't hear the name of the Assyrian king. A lot of interesting things going on here in these stories. A lot of generalizations. Why? And so, I share all of that to say this. Many times when I've spoken about Jonah, I'll have a lot of people ask me some really interesting questions. They'll say this. What kind of worm you think that was? You think that was a tent worm? I think it was a tent worm. You're like a tent. Oh, that ate the plant. Yeah. What kind of plant do you think that was? I don't know. A shrub of some sort? No, man, it was this plant. I can prove it. That's what they'll say to you. You're like, how do you prove it? I got an email once from my mother. It's Wikipedia. Like, okay. Or then we'll ask other questions. What kind of fish do you think this was? I think it was a whale. And again, those people that are asking the questions, they don't care about your answer. They just want to share theirs. It was a whale, a giant whale, sperm whale, blue whale. How do you think he survived? This is what I think. And they'll share with you. And so I've been to many sermons where I've heard this story told. And I just want to squash it a little bit. Is that all right with you? So I've heard many people say, this is what happened. It's happened before. And so this story will end up going down these weird places. Here's the story that many people will reference. It's been used for many, many years now. James Bartley, he claimed his boat, a whaling ship, the Star of the East. It was whaling, doing their thing, and they found a whale. They start harpooning it. And other smaller boats begin to circle it. And they begin to get to the place where they're going to kill the whale. But the whale, I guess, flips his tail thing, hits the water, knocks the boat over, and I guess a lot of people die. And what happens here is, James says, what happened is the whale actually came up and swallowed me whole. And I went through the whale inside, and I felt the sliminess of the whale, and I got to a place that was very hot. And in this heat, I began to pass out. And the story goes that he went unconscious in the whale's belly. But the whalers were able to take this whale and they were able to drag it all the way to shore, where they then opened up the whale a couple days later, and there inside they found James, half alive, but still alive. And they took him to the hospital where he had a speedy recovery and lived to tell the tale. The tale, not Flipper. And so, And so a man began to read about this story. And in 1970, this man, he said, you know what, I think this is an interesting story. I think we need to give it more attention. And so this individual, next slide, he said, I want to research this. And so Professor Edward B. Davis, they're important when they always put the middle initial, and Tony H. Werfel. Professor B. Davis, He researched this, and he started to delve into, this is a crazy story. I want to know more. And so he started to look into newspapers and vessel charts and captain's logs, and he found that there was a vessel named the Star of the East. And so he thought, oh, this is exciting. He began to delve even deeper into it. And as he delved deeper, his evidence began to lead him in a different direction he was wanting to go. Because here's what he found. No one ever reported to the hospital with that name during that time in that location. Bartley was actually never a crew member on the Star of the East. And then lastly, he had the opportunity to talk to the captain's wife, who acted like his mother maybe, I don't know. And the wife, she said to Davis, she said, I was with my husband all those years. Never once was there a story of a man swallowed by a whale from his ship. This is a great yarn spinning. And what happened is the more and more Davis dug in, the more and more he realized this was a story that was a bit fabricated. And what he found, though, during this time period, there was a whale story, an actual one that happened, where this whale breached itself up onto shore. I guess it had had enough of life. It could have ended. He breached himself up onto shore. And they opened him up, and they stuffed him, and they put him in the town square, this Gorleston whale story. And as it sat there in the middle of the square, people began to create these stories. And this was about the time that Bartley's story began to come into view. Why do I tell all of this to you? Here's why. When we begin to ask the wrong questions and we begin to try and make it literal or symbolic or whatever, we end up looking kind of silly, don't we? When we ask the wrong questions, we get really bad answers. The question is, what did this story mean to the people hearing it? When we get that, then we can apply it to today without looking foolish. You guys ready? We're going to do a verse-by-verse study in Jonah, and I am so pumped. I can tell you are too. Okay, let's do it. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. Now watch this. Jonah. Every word in the Hebrew has meaning and has multiple meanings. So the name Jonah means dove. Now watch this. Jonah, dove, the messenger. There was a flood once, and these people were held captive, and they were hoping to get home and receive the promise. And so a dove finally, after a couple times, flies to the ship, which they are held captive in, waiting for the promise of land, their own land, to happen. He brings them the promise. That's what the dove, the messenger, does. Does this sound familiar? This is fun, isn't it? This preaches. What kind of message are you sharing with people when you talk to them? Brimstone? The world's ending. Better get more water. Go to Costco, fill up. Or are you sharing messages of hope and repair? This world is full of life and beauty. What are you sharing with people? There's time for change. Messages of hope, challenge, repair. That's the word Jonah, the dove that flies and gives a message. He goes to Nineveh. Nineveh, the capital of Assyria. And guess what gods they worship there in Nineveh? If you watch the VeggieTales version, you're ready for this. Yeah, the fish gods, the gods of the ocean. So when you bring the story about a whale to Nineveh, interesting. Interesting story, interesting connections, bigger, bigger, bigger. He goes to his enemies, and he's supposed to share a message of challenge and hope to his enemies. How many of you are sometimes like me and you don't want to share positive or challenging words that could potentially help your enemies? How many of you periodically like to watch your enemies suffer? Again, I'm the only one, it appears. All right. I had this experience in in Colorado. I was a teacher. And anyone that's a teacher, you should just give them love and hug them and just tell them they're the greatest person in the world. Because teachers, especially in an Adventist or a smaller Christian school, they end up putting on a lot of hats. And so I was asked, by the way, first of all, anyone going into teaching, if someone ever asks you if you like to do something, just wait. Just be like, I don't know, what is it? Wait, because they're going to ask you to do something. And so they asked me, how do you feel about soccer? I was like, I love it, soccer. Football, soccer. I can bend it like Beckham. I love soccer. And so I had the principal say to me, oh, then you're our new coach. I was like, what? I don't coach soccer. So I had to coach soccer. And so I started, okay, I got to teach them how to do triangles, some of the things that come more natural to me. And so I had to learn to be a decent coach. And so I studied and studied and studied, and I tried all these different drills with the kids, and they were working. And we were a junior high team, but we would periodically play high school teams, and we destroyed them. They were playing kickball soccer. Run, pray it goes in the goal. God is good. But our team had it. But there were two kids who had two fathers who knew everything. And they started spreading rumors. Well, Tony's just getting lucky out there. If I was coach, it's always that. The critics in life, the people who critique you the majority of the time, they're just not actually living their own story, and it's much easier to critique yours. So this person, these individuals and their kids, they would critique my coaching. And so finally I was like, you know what? I'm going to get them back. I'm going to prove to them that I'm the best. I'm a coach. I'm a good coach. So I said one day to myself, I'm going to pretend I'm sick. And I'm going to let them know, hey, I'm not feeling well. Would you guys take over and coach that day? Because I knew these fools didn't know a thing. They thought they knew. They periodically watched soccer. They're experts. And so my friend Brian said, as he was watching my team get pummeled and destroyed and fall apart, he was like, Tony, this is a bloodbath, man. It's pretty ugly. And you would think that I would feel a sense of satisfaction. Yeah. Serves them right. But I didn't. I actually felt really miserable. Because these are my kids. These are my students. These were the kids that I was coaching. These were my players. And they were getting destroyed. Watching someone suffer should not bring us a sense of satisfaction. And if it does, this is a symptom that our hearts and our spiritual journeys have serious sickness. I struggled with that. I have a question for you. Are there people in your lives right now you are having a difficult time wishing well? Are there people in your life right now you kind of wish that harm would fall on them? Not death, of course, just a little something. Just enough to wake them up. Are you purposely silencing the voice of love, compassion, mercy because you want to see them bury themselves? You've actually said the phrase, he's just going to bury himself. He's just digging his own grave. The problem is that never actually satisfies. And so what happens is Jonah begins to go further and further away. He chooses not to allow God to allow him to be the messenger of love, hope, challenge for these people. And we're told that he goes toward Tarshish, which is southeast. So watch this. Jonah will go further and further downward. He'll go down toward Tarshish. He'll go down in the belly of a boat. He'll actually go all the way to the bottom of the ocean, and there he will go to Sheol. That's the word in the Hebrew. It actually means death. He'll go to the bottom of the ocean and die. He goes further and further down. And the word east should remind us in Genesis, when you go east of Eden, you head away from life. He goes away from the promise. And we're told he flees. And the word flee in the Hebrew means to sever relationship. When you move away from life, you sever that relationship. And you begin to experience pain and brokenness and death. And so we're told he goes below. Next verse. Then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. I think that's just a funny picture, don't you? If you don't turn around, I'm going to break this thing up. I'm going to fall apart. The ship talking. That's funny. I don't care what you laugh at. It's funny to me. All the sailors were afraid, and each one cried out to his own God, and they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. But Jonah had gone below deck, where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. Notice the difference between Jonah and the sailors. The sailors, they're throwing everything they have overboard because they realize that none of that is important enough to die for. They're throwing everything overboard. All of their money, their resources, their precious cargo goes. Jonah, he chooses to be silent. Let death come. That's what he says in the middle of his storm. What are you holding on to closest in your storms? In the middle of your storm, are you more worried about your reputation, your money? Or are you more interested in relationship, in the God that sustains life? Where are you? What are you holding on to, valuing most in your storm? These sailors, they actually show us a better understanding of God than Jonah does. Keep moving. The captain went up to him and said, "How can you sleep? Get up, call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us so that we will not perish." Then the sailors said to each other, "Come, let us cast our lots." An ancient tradition. This is what they would do. They would take pebbles or sticks and they would pull them out because that's how they thought God related to them, or the gods. And if you got the wrong one, oh no, God must be angry with you. That's how they viewed this thing of casting lots. And so, of course, the lot falls on Jonah. Next slide. And what happens here, they ask him some questions. Tell us, who's responsible for making all this trouble for us? What kind of work do you do? Where do you come from? Where's your country? From what people are you? And notice Jonah, he answers this. I am a Hebrew. Probably not that way though, doesn't he? He probably says it this way. I'm a Hebrew. Kind of like some of us do when someone calls us out as Christians. Wait, aren't you a Christian? Kinda. I go every once in a while. No, I just saw you leading praise the other day. Yeah, sometimes. You do it every week, Nathan. Well, there's that. I'm a Hebrew. They call him out. I have this bumper sticker. It says, "Love wins." And when I got it, I thought, this is brilliant. Because love, it does win. Love, it wins every time, except when I'm driving. And I was stupid enough to put it on my car. And so here in Southern California, where people don't always look at your blinker when you're trying to merge, love doesn't always win. And you find yourself sometimes saying words that would make your mother blush. And you sometimes find yourself saying, "You're number one." Or you give them the Tony Werfel look. What? I'm not yelling, I'm doing that because I want them to see it, but I'm not actually saying anything. I'm just like, what? They're probably like, "Sweetie, this insane man woke by and he was shaking his head like this. I don't know what happened. It is blinker on for an eternity." But every time I do something like this, here's what happens. I have this moment of awareness. I'm like, that stupid bumper sticker. Oh, it's on there. And I got so frustrated once, I actually tried to take it off. I scratched at it, and that thing is stuck. It is stuck. And that's the problem with when you hear the gospel message. It sticks. And it annoyingly sticks, doesn't it? Because you begin to notice things when you're around people. You see someone bullied or you see this thing happen, and your soul, it just cries out to do something. You can't ignore it anymore. Or you see a homeless person, which here you see them all the time, and you tell yourself, I'm not going to give them food. I'm not going to do anything for them. I know what they're up to, or whatever it is. And it hurts your soul because you just turned away from something you know you should have done. It sticks and it's painful. And to get that sucker off there, it's hard. It's hard to undo what Christ has done. And so Jonah, he goes deeper and deeper until finally, he tells the men, throw me over. I've told you once, throw me over this time. And the men, they finally throw Jonah overboard. They throw him overboard and they experience the calming of the sea. And we're told they begin to worship God. They offer a sacrifice to him because that was their ancient way of trying to show they understood that God had delivered them. And they began to worship God, while Jonah went deeper and deeper into despair and death and brokenness. What's causing your ship to sink today? Is there someone you're holding a grudge with and you just can't let it go? Are you so worried about the future you're not even present here in the now? Do you stubbornly keep going back to lifeless addictions, conversations, thoughts, even though those things are dragging you to the depths? You feel yourself going deeper and deeper into brokenness. The ancients, they understood what this looks like, and they wrote a psalm about it. In Psalm 1, it goes like this. Blessed is the one who does not walk in the step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers. They understood that this progression of moving away from God, it looks like this. Moving away from life, it looks like this. You begin to walk with an idea. Anyone ever do this? You know it's a terrible idea, but you just let it sink in a little bit. You begin walking with it. It's not that bad. It actually might be a good thing. You begin walking a little bit. The nice thing about walking is at some point you can turn around. There's still movement. But at some point you stop walking and then you buy the ticket. You're Jonah. You stop walking with it and you begin to stand with it. It begins to take root in you. You buy the ticket. And before long, you're doing this. You bought the ticket and now you're at the belly of the ship and you're sitting with it. And I'll tell you this, it's a whole lot harder to stand up. I can because I work out. But it is honestly a lot harder to stand up. Because motion is dead and those things they've rooted into your very soul. And so my question to you right now is, what are you walking with? What are you walking away from? Or maybe you're not walking anymore. Maybe you're standing with it. Or maybe you're sitting there and it's taken root in you. Your boats, I want you to hold them up for a minute. You got a boat. Your boats, for many of us, they are sinking. These boats are sinking. Relationships, health, your soul, and it feels like it's just sinking. And you've heard the call from God, step away from it, come to new life. But you continue to move away from it. Because maybe it's too difficult to make that decision or have that conversation. And so you sit with it. And your boat is getting heavier and heavier and heavier, and it is sinking. The sailors, they accept a new life, and they cast off their baggage. They cast off all the things that really don't have value, and they praise God in the end. Who needs to toss some things overboard today? What needs to be dealt with or maybe even left behind? What will help you turn in a direction back toward home? Today, my prayer for you is that you will cast off that baggage today. Maybe you need to stop for a minute and remember that that enemy is actually a human being too. Maybe you need to remember that your spouse, much like you, is needing to be heard and loved and accepted as well. May you today take a few minutes and remember the past. Remember that thing you keep going back to, it has a history of letting you down. Don't go back there. Leave it off of your ship. May you let those things fall to the depths before the depths swallow you whole. My prayer for you is that your journey will be a lighter one today, that you will allow some of that baggage to go, and you'll experience the calming of the sea and a new dawn resurrection experience today. That is what the Jonah experience will teach us all throughout the story. You'll see resurrection after resurrection happen. Because the beauty of resurrection is not that it happened, it's that it happens. May God bless you today on the Sabbath.